अच्छा जो चीजें मिस हुई है ना, I'll share video recordings for all the classes TK that have been missed by you guys. अच्छा, so this is about making formulas, right? And so we have to learn about how do we make formulas and equations, and it's going to be about balancing. Okay, and all of these equations are going to be, all of these equations are going to be linked with acid bases and salts. We're not studying acid bases and salts, but a lot of them will actually be linked with that. So we'll be studying a lot about acid bases and salts in this particular chapter. सही है? तो hold on a second. Hopefully everyone can see the screen. अच्छा, यहाँ पे acid bases salts. So let's start with very basic formulas. So formulas of ionic compounds. The first one. So we did. So I'll just give you a brief overview once more. Okay, you have an ionic compound, you have a metal, and you have a non-metal. What does the metal like to do? It likes to lose electrons, and the non-metal, it likes to gain electrons. So I'm going to start with the simplest one. Okay, so metal and non-metal, and let's talk about Mg. That's group 2. Okay, so this Mg over here has 12 electrons. Two in the first one. So I've got 2 electrons in the first one. There would be 8 in the second one, and there would be 2 electrons in the third shell. Okay, so let me draw that. 2 electrons, and I've got I've got 2 electrons, 8 electrons, and then I have 2 electrons in the last shell. So that is what Mg is. And a metal always wants to lose electrons. On the other side, I've got fluorine. Remember, the point is not dotting across. At the moment, we have to figure out what the formula is going to be. So the other one is fluorine. Fluorine has a total of 9 electrons. It's a non-metal, so it's got 2 electrons, and it's got 7 electrons in its outer shell. So what will happen is that Mg over here wants to lose 2 electrons. You can have a look. Its outer shell, it wants a complete outer shell. Its outer 2 electrons, these ones over here, they would be lost. But fluorine over here only has space or room for 1 electron. It can only accept 1 electron. So what will happen is that there's going to be 2 fluorines. So that one of the electrons over here, it goes to 1 fluorine, and the other electron, this one over here, goes to this fluorine, because 1 fluorine cannot accept 2 electrons. So that is how the ionic bond is going to, or compound is going to be formed. Mg is going to lose its outer shell. It loses 2 of its electrons in the outermost shell, and when it does that, it will get a charge of, it's going to get a charge of +2. And fluorine, on the other hand, becomes -1, and both of the fluorines, they become -1. So basically, the ionic compound is this one. It's going to be called Mg, and there are 2 Fs. He gets MgF2, right? So for every 1 Mg, there's going to be 2 fluorines. Mg loses 2 electrons, but fluorine can only accept, it's only got room for 1 electron, so it only accepts 1. So there should be 2 fluorines, okay? And that's the formula. There's 1 Mg, and there's going to be 2 fluorines, okay? So that's the formula of this particular compound. And the name of this compound is going to be, for ionic compounds, the name is going to be magnesium. And instead of fluorine,
Fluoride.
For a negative ion, when a non-metal forms a negative ion, it becomes an ide. So instead, it will be called fluoride. So it's going to be called fluoride. So remember this, the naming convention. You have a positive ion, you've got a negative ion, right? So the name of the negative ion changes. So when an element, so when a non-metal forms a negative ion, so when it forms a negative ion, so when it forms a negative ion, suffix changes to ide. So it changes to IDE. So if I have chlorine Cl, it's group 7, so it has a -1 charge. So it's going to be called, instead of chlorine, it's going to be called chloride. It's going to be ide at the end. If I've got sulfur and it's got a -2 charge, so sulfur is sulfur, but if it has a -2 charge, it's going to be called sulfide. The end will be IDE. If I have nitrogen, but now it's a negative ion, it's got a -3 charge. Instead of nitrogen, it's going to be called nitride. So remember, what does this ide mean? Ide means that the element is now a negative ion. It's no longer a neutral atom. It's a negative ion. Phosphorus will become phosphide. If P has a charge of -3, so the phosphorus thing will be, uska end hat jayega. It's going to be called phosphide. That's the first thing. I said we did dot and cross diagrams, right? So positive ion and negative ions, they would all be together, and this is the formula. There's going to be 1 Mg and there's going to be 2 fluorines, and that's how you make the formula. Now we don't want the dot and cross diagrams. What I want to know is, can I make the formula directly? So instead of doing all the working, I don't want to do that working. I just want to know what the formula is. Okay, if they tell me magnesium fluoride, is it MgF2, is it MgF3, is it MgF? What is the formula? So there's a direct way of doing that. And now remember, ionic compounds, you already know the charges of the ions. You don't have to actually draw the whole dot and cross diagram. What is the charge on group 1 if it forms an ion? Okay, what's group 1?
1 plus.
Okay, so that is 1 plus. Group 2 usually is 2 plus. Anything that's in group 3 will most likely be 3 plus. 4 can kind of has metalloids, metals and non-metals. So let's leave group 4. Group 5, what is the charge on group 5?
3 minus.
So that's going to be 3 minus. Group 5, remember, has 5 electrons in its outer shell. So it's going to gain 3. Group 6 will have 6 electrons. It's going to gain 2 electrons. It's going to be 2 minus. And group 7 will be 1 minus. So first thing is, remember what the charges are on each of the elements in all these groups. So you must know them. That's one thing. I said, coming back to magnesium fluoride, I'm going to tell you what the shortcut is of figuring out what the formula is. The shortcut is known as the crisscross method. And that one simplifies things. The crisscross. What is the crisscross? That's I've got Mg, and I know that Mg is group 2, so that's 2 plus. I know fluorine, that's group 7. Group 7 is 1 minus. So all I have to do is, if I want to do crisscross, remember, so the thing is that the charges you can figure out directly by looking at the group number. Group 2, का क्या मतलब है? It's got 2 plus charge. Group 7 means it's got a 1 minus charge. So you can figure out the charges directly. You don't have to do much. Now Mg is 2 plus, F is 1 minus. All you have to do now is you should 2 and just bring this 2 over here and this 1 to the other side. So the formula, if I do that, don't bring the plus and minus, just the number. So Mg would be 1 and fluorine will be twice. So it's going to be Mg1, F2. And that is exactly what we figured out over here as well. That the formula is going to be Mg. You don't have to write 1. If you just write Mg, that's Mg. Okay? You don't have to write 1. Even if you write 1, there's no issue with that. So the formula is going to be Mg1, F2. So you just had to do that. Okay? This was the quick hack of figuring out what the formula is. So no need to draw dot and cross diagrams. All you have to do is just do crisscross. That's it. If I open the old board where we did all the dot and cross diagrams, एक second देना. ये clear है? Shoaib, Urva,
Yes,
is
sir.
this?
Yes, sir.
अच्छा, so
Yes, sir.
ये वाला था ना, atomic structure and chemical bonding is. So if I open the old board, so that means you never had to actually, I mean, there's no point drawing the dot and cross diagram because you can just very quickly figure out the formula. So, अच्छा, so किधर क्या था हमने Ionic? अच्छा, so we did lots of ionic compounds over here. Okay, these are the properties, and then I think we started doing examples. So this is sodium and oxygen, right? So if I wanted to do sodium and oxygen, I just wanted to figure out the formula, right? All I had to do was I would have sodium, and I have to crisscross here. I have oxygen, right? Sodium is group 1. Group 1 means it's got a charge of +1. Oxygen is group 6. Group 6 will have a charge of -2. Do crisscross. Uska 2 utha ke niche le, that's Na will become, bring the 2 down, Na would become 2 and oxygen will become 1. Okay, just switch the position of these. Na becomes 2 and O becomes 1. And look at the diagram as well. There's 1 oxygen and there are 2 Nas, right? So that's it. That's the formula. Okay. And we can try and do this for the other ones as well. You got as that's magnesium. फिर और भी किए थे काफी we did. So we've got aluminium and you got oxygen, right? So aluminium is group 3, so that's +3. And oxygen is group 6, so that's -2. Do crisscross. So Al, the 2 on oxygen will go with Al, and the 3 on aluminium will go with oxygen. So it's going to be Al2O3. That's the formula. 2 Als and 3 oxygen. So it's pretty easy TK to figure out the formula of ionic compounds. ये भी वही है. Na and N. Na is group 1, so that's +1. N is group 5. Group 5 का क्या charge होता है? That's -3. So do crisscross. Na will become 3. So there would be 3 Nas and there's going to be 1 N. Okay, so there would be 3 sodiums and there would be just one nitrogen. And that's your crisscross. ठीक है? तो वापस अगर उस पर चले जाए, कहाँ पे बोर्ड हमारा? अच्छा, is this clear, crisscross?
Yes, sir.
All you have to remember is this thing. Okay, memorize this. I mean, it's not that big of a deal. You just have to remember this, that group 5 elements are -3. Group 6 elements is -2. Group 7 elements are -1. 2 is +2. 3 is +3, and so on. So, let's quickly try and practice a few questions. यहाँ पे let's say I've got sodium and sulfur. Na plus S. Na is group 1 and S is group 6. So can somebody just work out, okay, what's the formula of this compound? crisscross करके क्या होगा? What's the formula of this compound? Has anyone done this? The first one. Anyone? Abdullah, Ayan? Amna, first क्या होगा? Urva? First क्या होगा?
Na2S.
Okay, so it's going to be Na2S. Na is group 1, right? So I'm just going to do the working here. It's going to be Na is group 1, so it's +1. S is group 6. Group 6 means it's -2. So if you do crisscross, Na will become 2 and S will be 1. And you don't have to write 1, because I'm just going to remove that. So the second one, Al is group 3, F is group 7. So what is that?
ALF3.
Okay, so Al is group 3, okay, exactly. Al is group 3, so that's +3. And F is group 7, so that's -1. Okay, that one is, one second. So that one is -1. So it's going to be Al1 and F is going to be 3. Okay, and again, you don't have to write 1. As anyways, the names of the two compounds, the first one would be sodium. The first one is going to be sodium and sulfide. Okay, that's going to be sulfide. And this one would be aluminium. And fluoride. Okay, so instead of fluorine, it's going to be fluoride. And you can just continue with this one. You've got, let's say calcium plus N. So if I do calcium plus N, what's the formula of this compound? Calcium is group 2 and N is group 5. So this one is going to be calcium plus 2 and N will be group 5. So that's 3 minus. So what is the formula? It's going to be Ca. So there's going to be 3 Cas and
CH3N2.
N2, okay, exactly. And the name of this compound would be, instead of calcium and nitrogen, it's going to be calcium nitride. Okay, the name of the negative element, okay, it becomes ID. So crisscross is simple. We'll keep doing this. Just remember, you can pick any element, and remember, an ionic compound is always formed between a positive ion and a negative ion. It's always between a metal, because वरना तो वो attract ही नहीं करेंगे. It has to be a positive ion attracted to a negative ion. So it has to be a metal, which means group 1, 2, 3, and it has to be a non-metal, which is 5, 6, 7. So it's always going to be, ionic compounds are always between positive ions and negative ions. You can't have two positive ions, you can't have two negative ions. Varna, there's not going to be any attraction between them. There's going to be attraction over here. Positive ions, negative ions. There's going to be attraction. So this is how you figure out the formula of ionic compounds. But the thing is, okay, the ionic compounds are not limited to the ions that you see in the periodic table. It's not just यहाँ पे periodic table है ना? कहाँ पे गया? So you have a periodic table, and where's the periodic table? So you got positive ions on this side, metals, and you got negative ions on this side, that's non-metals. So the ionic compound is not just limited to your periodic table atoms, because sometimes what will happen is that molecules can also form ions. Okay, so there's another class of ions which we will call polyatomic ions. अच्छा पहले बताओ यहाँ तक clear है ना पिछला सारा crisscross, is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
अच्छा now there's another class of ions. ये जो भी ions के ना, that's simple, right? For example, iodine is group 7, so I know it's -1. Rubidium is group 1, so I know it's +1. Strontium is group 2, so I know it's +2. So you can easily, very quickly, there's nothing to it. You can easily, very quickly figure out what the charge is. I said, but these ions are not found in the periodic table. And you have to memorize them. These are your polyatomic ions. What happens is, what's a polyatomic ions? Sometimes what will happen is that there's a covalent molecule and that molecule ends up gaining or losing electrons. I mean, that's how ions are formed, right? You gain or lose electrons, right? If you lose electrons, you become positively charged. If you gain electrons, because of the negative charge of the electron, you become negatively charged. So sometimes what happens is a covalent molecule ends up gaining or losing electrons. So although the detail is not important, you just have to memorize this, but I'll give you one example just so that you have some understanding of this. So a covalent molecule is between nonmetals. So here is oxygen, that's a nonmetal, group 6. Group 6 means that it's got 6 electrons in its outer shell. So this is oxygen over here, right? Group 6, it's got 6 electrons in its outer shell. Group number ka matlab hai ki that's the number of electrons in the outer shell. So now, what is the property of nonmetals? They always try to gain electrons. They never lose electrons. So if I have hydrogen over here, and I have another hydrogen over here, the oxygen, they all want to gain electrons. No one wants to lose electrons. So oxygen is in the middle. So think of the oxygen atom as a person in the middle. और उसको hydrogen का electron नजर आता है. It will try to gain that electron, right? And this oxygen will also try to gain electron from the other side. It needs 2 electrons. But a non-metal never loses electrons. So what happens is, so the oxygen in the middle is trying to steal electrons from both atoms. So both the atoms, they get pulled towards the oxygen, but they never let go of the electron. The other hydrogen atom also gets pulled and dragged towards this oxygen atom, but it never loses that electron. That's the property of nonmetals. They don't like to lose electrons. The end result kya hoga? No, the electrons are stuck in the middle, right? And that's basically a covalent molecule. So the oxygen atom pulled 1 electron from one side and 1 electron from the other side, but the whole atom came along with it. It did not lose the electron. It just came along, right? So because it was very attracted to that electron, so it didn't let go of it. So this is a neutral covalent molecule. No one lost electrons, no one gained electrons. So this is like a neutral covalent molecule, and that's what a covalent molecule is. Okay? And that's what a covalent bond is. इस हमने किया डिटेल में, ठीक है? कल वाला लेक्चर जो मैंने भेजा ना, just make sure you go through that in detail. अच्छा, याद clear? Is this clear? This covalent molecule, right?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
अच्छा, so
Yes, sir.
so let's go back. Restart. What will happen now? ठीक है, इसका इलेक्ट्रॉन इसको वापस कर देते हैं. अच्छा, now remember, oxygen wanted how many electrons? 2 electrons, right? Because its outer shell needs 2 electrons. What if you just had 1 hydrogen? That 1 hydrogen came along and started sharing electrons. Oxygen pulled that 1 electron, so the hydrogen came along. And अब मुझे बताओ कि, so let's say instead of 2 hydrogen, you just had 1 hydrogen. तो मुझे बताओ oxygen का काम complete हुआ है. Oxygen is still deficient, right? It needs how many electrons right now? One more, right? Because its outer shell is still not complete. So what if there's a sodium atom around? So what if there's a sodium atom around? Now the sodium atom is not a non-metal. It's actually a metal. So let's say there's a sodium atom around. So we're short of hydrogen, and instead we have a sodium atom. And sodium atom has 11 electrons. Now, what is the property of metals? They lose electrons. They don't attract the electrons, they always lose electrons. So oxygen will try to do the same thing. It will try to pull this electron towards itself. But when oxygen tries to pull that electron, tries to fill its outer shell, sodium, instead of fighting over that electron, will simply let go of that electron. Sodium is not attracted to that electron. So the electron will go and it will just go with, I say that electron is going to end up with oxygen over here. And sodium will get a +1 charge, right? Because metal जो होता है वो क्या करता है? It always loses electrons. So the metal simply just let go of its electrons, and the electron ended up being gained by oxygen, right? And sodium gets a +1 charge. Now this entire molecule will get a -1 charge. Why? Because instead, this entire molecule ended up gaining this 1 electron from sodium. ये जो एक electron नहीं था, it actually was with sodium, but now it's with this OH thing. So the entire molecule actually ended up gaining electrons, but now its outer shell is complete. So this is what a polyatomic ion is. This is OH, but it now has a charge of -1. So sometimes what happens is, okay, there's a molecule and its outer shell is still not complete, even after forming a covalent bond. So if there's a metal roaming around, it might end up gaining an electron from that metal, and it will become an ion. So basi basic idea clear hai what's a polyatomic ion? Is that clear? Just the general idea. I mean, you don't have to go into a lot into details about this. But is this idea clear that to complete the outer shells, sometimes molecules end up gaining and losing electrons? Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So even this part, you don't have to remember this, right? All you have to remember this is, okay, there's a thing called OH and it has a charge of -1. It's this thing. This is known as the hydroxide ion. Okay, this is known as a hydroxide ion. You can't find that in the pure table. So that's a molecule that has gained 1 electron. So it's the hydroxide ion. All you have to know is the name of this ion and the formula of this ion, that it's OH and it has a charge of -1. And you've got lots of similar ions which you have to memorize. Okay, so periodic table wala kaam to aasan tha. Group 1 is +1, group 2 is +2, group 3 is +3, and so on. But hydroxide, sulfate, nitrate, carbonate, all of these names, they have to be remembered. So I'm going to make a list of these, and you have to memorize this list. This list is extremely important. Okay, so this is the list of polyatomic ions, all of the ones that you're going to study. So starting with hydroxide, okay, that's your OH with a charge of -1. That's the first one that we did. Forget the structure, just the general concept of what a polyatomic ion is. As you've got nitrate. Nitrate is NO3 and it's got a charge of -1. You can remember to memorize all of this. As after that, you've got sulfate, which is SO4 and it's got a charge of -2. As you've got carbonate, and it's CO3, but it's got a charge of -2. Phosphate. So remember, this is not IDE, this is ATE. So your phosphate is year 4, it's got a charge of -3. So what else? You've got carbonate, sulfate, nitrate, so you got sulfite. Okay, this is ITE. So that's SO3 with a charge of -2. nitrite. That's NO2 with a charge of -1. And you've got phosphite. So that's PO3 with a charge of -3. So then you have some more which are, you've got hydrogen carbonate. That's HCO3 with a charge of -1. Hydrogen sulfate. So that is HSO4 with a charge of -1. You've got ammonium, that's very important. So you've got ammonium, that's NH4 with a charge of +1. And these should be on your fingertips. Like if I say phosphate, you should know that it's PO4 with a charge of -3. If I say sulfite, that's SO3 with a charge of -2. अच्छा कुछ और कर लेते हैं. You got dichromate 6. ठीक है, these are not that important, but अच्छा dichromate 6 is Cr2O7 and it's got a charge of 2-. You've got peroxide, that's O2 with a charge of -2. -2, yes. You've got magnate 7. That's MnO4 and -1. And it's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. You've got a lot there. So the cyanide ion, that's Cn with a charge of -1. Okay, that's I guess that's about it. So all these polyatomic ions, you just have to memorize this. You just have to memorize all of this. Ye clear? Is this clear? Ayan, clear?
Yes, sir.
So,
Yes, sir.
so the next part is we're going to do crisscross with polyatomic ions. Remember, there's going to be a positive ion attached to a negative ion. Positive and negative ions, they get attracted to each other. So let's say I've got calcium plus hydroxide. Okay, so I'm going to try and figure out what the formula is, right? It's calcium is group 2, so I know it's +2. Hydroxide kya tha? We just did hydroxide. Hydroxide was the first one. That's OH and it's got a charge of -1. So hydroxide is OH with a charge of -1. So what will happen? Do crisscross. Okay, there's a positive ion attached to a negative ion. So calcium would be 1 and OH will be 2. So put a bracket around OH. There would be 2 OH ions. So that is what the formula is going to be. This is called calcium hydroxide. Okay, that's what the name is. So that's our first one. Okay, so attach any positive ion to a negative ion, you'll get something. So what about aluminium? Let's do another one. Aluminium. Now aluminium is group 3. So I know that aluminium is +3. Okay, that's group 3. And I'm using aluminium. I want to make the formula of aluminium nitrate, right? So the question is, what is nitrate? Nitrate, either don't know what is nitrate. Nitrate is this thing. It's NO3 and the whole thing has a charge of -1. So it's NO3 and that NO3 has a charge of -1. Do crisscross now. So how many aluminiums? There's going to be 1 aluminium. Okay, so there's going to be 1 aluminium, right? And NO3s. How many NO3s will you have? You'll have 3 of them. Okay, so you'll have. I said, remember, don't change the formula. Okay, you can just change the quantity that you're going to have 2 of them. So NO3, put it in brackets and make it 2. If you're going to have 3 of them, so you 3, that means how many NO3s you're going to have. This one, that means how many aluminiums you're going to have. So you're going to have one aluminium and there's going to be 3 NO3s. Okay. Similarly, if I have so let's do calcium with phosphate. What is going to be the formula? Calcium is group 2, so that's calcium with a charge of +2. Phosphate, either देखो phosphate, what is phosphate? Phosphate is this thing, it's PO4 and the whole thing has a charge of -3. So that's PO4 and the whole thing has a charge of -3. So if I do crisscross over here, it's going to be calciums kitne honge? There would be 3 of them. So they're going to be 3 calciums. And how many PO4s will I have? I'm going to have kitne PO4s? There would be 2 of them. So put a bracket and there would be 2 PO4s. You clear? This one?
Yes, sir.
ठीक है, बाकी सब Rabia, is this clear? Urva?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So you can keep making formulas like this, but it has to be a positive ion. You can't have 2 positive ions together because 2 positive ions will repel each other. They will never form a compound. 2 negative ions will not form a compound. It's a positive ion always attracted to a negative ion. As I said, I'm going to just write some questions and I'm going to give you an assignment, a short one. Okay. Open the periodic table. Jo elements, you can just figure out group their charges based on the group number, right? So let's say sodium phosphate. What is sodium phosphate? Okay, that's going to be Na, and it's +1. And phosphate is PO4 -3. So if you do crisscross, it's going to be kitne sodiums honge? There would be 3 of them. Okay, so there would be 3 sodiums. And how many phosphates? There's going to be, I mean, this is +1, so there's just going to be 1 of them. So how many PO4s? There's going to be just 1 of them. Okay, that's sodium phosphate. I'm going to write down a few elements. So number 1, potassium. Number 2 is, let's say, calcium, and you got aluminium. So I've got these 3. Combine them with each one and make a formula with each one of them. Like potassium, combine it with what is potassium with hydroxide? What is potassium with nitrate? What is potassium with sulfate? What is potassium with carbonate? Okay, what is potassium with dichromate 6? So combine and write down the formula of potassium with all polyatomic ions, one by one. Okay, like potassium hydroxide. What is potassium hydroxide? What is potassium phosphate? What is potassium nitrate? And the same goes for calcium, right? So that's basically the question. Okay, so make the formula, and I'm going to share the share kar raha hu, okay? The board link. Okay, sharing it here.
Sir, is it important to add brackets? Like,
अच्छा नहीं, 1 ये वाला तो मैंने वैसे explain करने के लिए किया है. When you have 1, you don't have to write brackets. ठीक है?
all right.
I mean, because 1 is automatically 1. If you write 1, there's nothing wrong with it. But 1 के लिए तो you don't have to write brackets. I mean, it's still 1 PO4, right? So the brackets were kind of irrelevant over here. But over here, it's important. ये जो दूसरा नहीं था. Here, it's important. For 1, it's not important. But aluminium and nitrate, so you have to, this is +3, so there would be 3 NO3s, right? So you have to put a bracket and then say that it's 3. So यहाँ पे it's very important to write brackets. Is that clear?
Yes, sir.
Over here, it's very important to write brackets because OH was -1, calcium was +2. 2 means that there would be 2 OH, right? So even over here, it's very, very important to add brackets. ठीक है? तो लेकिन assignment समझ आ गई ना कि क्या है? Potassium, calcium, and aluminium, right? With all the polyatomic ions, and I've पता नहीं शेयर किया मैंने कि नहीं किया. एक सेकेंड, बोर्ड लिंक शेयर कर लूँ ये मैं. अच्छा तो 2 दफा शेयर हो गया, उधर शेयर कर देता हूँ ग्रुप पे. जस्ट 1 सेकेंड. भाई मैंने यहाँ पे लिख भी दिया पोटेशियम, Ca एंड क्या था, एल्यूमिनियम. Formulas with all polyatomic ions. As I'm actually going to share the screenshot of the polyatomic ions as well. कि अच्छा इन सारों की स्क्रीनशॉट भी शेयर कर लेते हैं कि अच्छा चले ठीक है. ओके एवरीवन, वो तो मैंने शेयर कर दिए. मेक श्योर यू हैंड दिस इन. ठीक है.
Okay, sir.
ओके, अल्लाह हाफिज.
Office.
हाफिज.